Thank y'all. And Donald, thank you for sharing, man. It's a tough thing to follow and it's a beautiful thing to listen to, so thank you. Have y'all ever experienced that feeling where time stops? And in that moment, you're vulnerable and you're just the core of who you are. And you can feel around whatever force field is where time is moving, that's somewhere beyond where you can reach. That there's chaos and control and everything that happens in everyday life. That's what my story is about. That happened to me when I was 23 years old. And before that, I had really no direction by choice, and I would like to think it was by choice, but it was just by where I was in my life. I signed up I took a scholarship for Mercer for a program I didn't want to do, so I dropped out. I decided that somewhere along the way I'd been introduced to Jack Kerouac, which gave me an excuse to be directionless, or at least put words to my directionless and make it at least, romantic.
I know that's right.
And went to school in Germany and came home, and with that sense of directionlessness, if that's a word, was just kind of overwhelming. And I was home. I grew up in Middle Georgia. I grew up in Monroe County. And I took a job at a pizza place in Ingleside Village. I think we've all been there and know the owner. She went to high school with my mother and my aunt and was very close. And so she was very sweet to give this directionless little hippie a job, as she has done for dozens and dozens of directionless hippies for generations. And we're all very grateful for that. So one Saturday before my shift, she asked me to come in a little early and sat me down and with tears in her eyes said, "Seth, you are the worst pizza cook I've ever hired." It would be better if you were a good waiter, but you talk to the people at the table too much and somehow you weasel your way into a political conversation, and that's not, dinner. Also, the trigger warning to Julia, there will be politics in this. I'm sorry, I should have said it from the beginning. That's not, we have to turn tables, not keep them. So I have to fire you. And she said it through tears. And she said that I will write you the most glowing letter of recommendation when you figure out how to change the world. Those were her words. What you want to do to make your mark on the world, to change it, I'll write that letter. But I'm never, ever telling one other restaurant or bar owner to hire you, ever. So no one knows. So right there, through my tears, I said, should I work the shift? And she said, no, it's okay, we got it covered. And she said, I said, well, I've just toyed around this with the idea. I'm going to join the Peace Corps. She was like, yeah, that's exactly what you need to do. But I dropped out of Mercer and had not gone back. So the Peace Corps was not open for business, but AmeriCorps was. And so I took Tina up on her offer, and she wrote a letter of recommendation, and I signed up for AmeriCorps, which is the domestic Peace Corps. It is the national service program that was founded in the 90s to give directionless Americans a year of service to give back to their communities in some form or fashion. I was placed in a statewide AmeriCorps program for homelessness. The federal government saw it fit punishment for me not to finish school to be the ever hardworking June O'Neill's AmeriCorps member, which if you do not know June, she is the hardest working person, and if you have ever volunteered for June, you have been the hardest working volunteer in Macon. And that was my job, but it had a very specific non-June aspect to it. I had to be a caseworker for children entering in and out of the homeless service providing system in Macon, which I did for a year, and it began to give me direction. It began to make me see past beatnik poetry finding me, looking to that to find me, that there was something bigger, and there was a community that passed the hedonistic words of Allen Ginsberg and Jack Kerouac. So I signed up again and moved to Atlanta to help start a legal clinic for the homeless, in the largest emergency overflow in the southeastern United States. It was started by Mayor Andrew Young when he was mayor of the city of Atlanta, before I got there. And it had stayed that way. It had grown to house 1,100 lost individuals a night, hurting individuals a night. And if you've never met somebody that's homeless, and I know that we all have, it doesn't matter if that person has experienced homelessness for 15 years due to addiction and mental illness, or this is the first 15 minutes they've ever felt instability in their life. It's the worst moment you'll ever talk to them. Being homeless in any part of that journey is the worst moment of your life. And this building had 1,100 individuals suffering in it daily. I lived there. I moved in the building was a 90 square foot old Packard car building that had been retrofitted to essentially warehouse, was the criticism of the facility, by the city of Atlanta, by the government. Warehouse individuals, and it was an old car warehouse. It was also a place of change, peace, transition for a lot of people that were hurting. Thousands of people that were hurting. It had 50 transitional housing apartments. We had 18 caseworkers. We had a budget of $3.5 million. We were changing people's lives, and that's what I moved into. Every morning I would wake up and walk down this industrial stairwell and had this old metal door that you had to kick open real hard. And I'd kick it open, and right there would be one of the security guards with a nice, refreshing pack of cool cigarettes that went very well with my morning coffee. And I would buy one from him for a quarter and smoke my cigarette and walk down the hill to my office. And if you don't know this shelter, if you don't know Atlanta very well, it's at the corner of Peachtree Street and Pine Street. What's across the street is Emory Crawford Lawn. This is the heart of the business sector of downtown Atlanta, which edifies why the city of Atlanta was so keen on criticizing the warehousing of these humans, of these people that were majority, when I say majority, I mean 98% black men in Dr. King's hometown, criticizing this place that was helping. That's where it was, and that edifies their criticism of it. They wanted it somewhere else. They wanted it anywhere else. But that's where I lived. That's where I worked. And when I would have my cigarette, I would walk down, and there was a man named Tennessee. Tennessee was debilitatingly schizophrenic. He was addicted to crack cocaine and alcohol. And he was one of the sweetest human beings I've ever encountered in my entire life. Every morning he would come up to you, and it depended on how high he had gotten the night before or drunk he had gotten, but he was just this animated character that would tell you about this fantastical world that he was forced by genetics alone to live in. And he would latch on to you until you could give him the shorts of your cigarette and walk you down to your office every morning. And he would tell you about the demons that lived behind his eyes, or the angels he had seen that had talked to him the evening before, which I am still to this day certain existed and talked to him every evening. I would go into my office, and I would sit, and every day sit at a desk that we had cleaned out, much like my office at City Hall now. It was a closet, literally a storage closet that we cleaned out to put a desk in. The only thing on my wall was a portrait of Robert F. Kennedy, because I was a team player. Robert F. Kennedy was a face of the Democratic Party that I cared about. I am a Democrat, And that is something that defines who I am. I was 23, this was 2008. This was the year Democrats were going to change the world with the most interesting and fascinating candidate we had seen since Robert Kennedy. We knocked on doors in town. We came home to Macon and knocked on doors. We did everything we could for Barack Obama. And so I was a team player. And it just didn't match with what I saw come out of these elected Democrats' mouths about the place that I saw changing people's lives in the city of Atlanta. And it broke my heart because these were people that I knew and that I loved. These were caseworkers that were changing people's lives and that were living with the suffering that they were trying to alleviate every day and taking that home to their families. This was the party of Lyndon Johnson who started the war on poverty. This was Barack Obama's party. He was running on this. And here they were at the rallies I would go to, but then they would go back to City Hall and try to shut this place down. And they were succeeding. During that time, my legal clinic filed a lawsuit against the city of Atlanta alleging tortious interference of our funding. The city of Atlanta systematically went to our donors and asked them to not donate for the sake of the business community in Atlanta, and it worked. Over the course of a number of years, that center lost over $1.5 million. They had to lay off caseworkers. During that time, the deaths in the city of Atlanta increased. That was the context that I lived in October of 2008, weeks before this country was about to change. We had hope. I had hope. And my friends at the center had hope. And even in the fantastical world that my dear friend Tennessee had, he understood that hope existed. And he understood that this center brought hope. There was a moment in the month of October, or at least in the near before that, the end of Halloween. I guess it may have been mid-September. We had an AmeriCorps team come that I was hosting to do work on the center, and we decided to go out drinking in Midtown. I mean, we're all volunteers on this, awesome 90 square foot building, and we're by the center of the universe. Let's go out and see what Atlanta has to offer, and we did. We walked home, and it was probably 1:30 in the morning, and a man stepped out. We were in Central Park. I don't know if you know where that is in Atlanta, but it's in the Midtown area. We were in Central Park, and a man stepped out onto the sidewalk and put a gun in our face and said, "Give us your wallet." And we said, "Of course, you can have it. There's nobody in the bank account, and you've literally decided to rob the poorest people that are going to walk through here that aren't living at the shelter, but we are living at the shelter, so, I hate this for you. Our cards are going to decline." And we actually made this case. We tried to make our case. In that moment, Tennessee walked up, and he grabbed this man's wrist right here with the gun, he's holding the gun, and he forced the hand down and said, "Hey, these guys are with the Pine." The center was called the Task Force for the Homeless at Peachtree and Pine. The guy gave one of my colleagues had already given his wallet up, and as we all were planning on, we were going to follow suit. But he got his wallet back, and Tennessee walked us home. And he went to where he had to sleep, which was outside. Tennessee would tell you, "Why can't you come in and get services?" He would say, "I got sticky fingers, and they don't let people with sticky fingers in Peachtree and Pine." He was right. You can't steal a lot of stuff and stay where you're stealing. And so he had a fort across the street. And he went home to his fort and he slept. On Halloween of 2008, you wake up and you feel a cadence of Atlanta. You feel people outside. There's no air conditioning in this place, so you feel your windows are open and you feel the people recovering from a hard night caffeinating. You feel traffic pick up. You can just hear these cadences, and something was off. The cadence was off. It was also Halloween. We walked down, and I went to my office, and I was sitting in my chair, And where my chair was, there's a window, a huge bay window, about the size of half this wall. And the windows swung open, and they were open. And we hear, I hear Tennessee screaming, and we look down, and that was also not uncommon. Tennessee, again, was sick and a very animated individual, so it wasn't uncommon, but this felt off, this felt different. And so we looked down, and me and my colleague were sitting, we had desks that were against the wall, and I saw Tennessee fall flat. And he could not get his hands up. He fell flat, and his face on the concrete in the parking lot exploded. We all started, including, again, this is a center with 1,100 people that lived there. Everybody ran. Everyone knew Tennessee. The police knew Tennessee. The caseworkers knew Tennessee. The residents knew Tennessee. Everyone knew Tennessee. And we all ran. And when I got there, there was a circle around him. And no one was with him. And when you run AmeriCorps, you have to go through a lot of health training or CPR training. And so I was the first one there, and I ran up and asked somebody to call the paramedics. And I rolled him over, and he was a bloody mess. And he was not breathing. And so I began to do chest compressions as other caseworkers and people with medical training began to get there. But no one had any more medical training than I did at the facility. We all had been through the same training. So I kept going. And that's when you felt times begin to slow down. You were waiting for the inevitable next move, because in CPR, I think we all have at least seen it on television. There's two things you do. You do chest compressions first. Then you have to do mouth-to-mouth. Because of all of our casework with Tennessee, everyone around knew that he was HIV positive and there was blood everywhere. And when we had ran from the facility, we didn't grab the CPR stuff. We went to our friend. And so we didn't know what to do. So I ripped my shirt off and ripped it in half and folded it over and began to give CPR to my friend. And I vacillated back and forth with time stopped. And a paramedic grabbed my shoulders and pulled me away. And in that moment, I've never been a person who, like Susanna said, I've spent a lot of time on the river. When I'm on the river, I'm most certainly wearing a shirt. I'm not a fit person and not one of these guys that, shows off his six-pack. And so I've always been, not one to take my shirt off. But there I was in this fall weather in the heart of the business district with no shirt, giving CPR to a dead man. And I was standing there and I'm also quite tall, and my friend Keely, who was Corin, no offense to your height, and all she could do was hug me. And I just remember being very lone and very vulnerable and knowing that my friend had died. When you process that as a 23-year-old in this era of hope and of politics, and the juxtaposition of the team of something that's so important to you that you keep one of its masthead people on your wall, you process it through a lens that you have to explain it. And the way that I could only process it is that this was a policy decision. Somebody made a decision that this situation that I existed in, where time stood still, would happen. And they did. I still, all these years later, believe that. I believe that anybody working in social services, and there's many here tonight, that are standing next to a rushing river with people in it. Thousands of people. And they're given 2 life preservers, and they're told to get it out, get them out. pull them out. And you missed some. And we missed Tennessee. We couldn't get a life preserver around him. Obama was elected, obviously, thankfully. But the river was still rushing. And the people that were doing it were somehow allowed to share the same name of the same club of Obama. They could go to the rallies and they could be Mr. Mayor, Mrs. Mayor, Mr. Councilman, Mr. Democrat. I introduced the next President of the United States. They could get all those accolades because they were in the same club. That started the war on poverty. That had declared a war on homelessness. But they were standing at the top of that river and they were throwing people in it. And it was the only way I could process it. So for the next number of years, unfortunately, the lawsuit that we filed was settled. The city of Atlanta was forced to pay millions of dollars to admit what they did, that they had tried to close that, and succeeded in closing that facility down. That all those thousands of people that lived there were disbanded, they were kicked out of that facility, and the beds that were there were not replaced one for one by the city of Atlanta. It was unceremonious. That same year, 50 other people lost their lives in the city of Atlanta because of homelessness. Not just Tennessee. In 1 year. And then later, this facility, this life-changing facility, was gone. And the city of Atlanta had to admit that they did it and pay millions of dollars. And it barely made the AJC's daily jolt. So I moved on. When a government does that, your paychecks kind of don't cash or bounce because the facility doesn't have any money. And so you leave. You find something else to do. So for the next number of years, I worked to stop those people at the top of the river. And the only way that I knew how to do it. As Susanna alluded to, I really like politics, and so I decided to work to beat them. And I ran campaigns for people that I thought, if they were stuck in this room where a decision like that was going to be made, to close this facility, to hurt these people, they would have the moral fiber to say no. It didn't matter what club you were in. It obviously didn't matter if you shared a club with these moral characters that we work too hard sometimes to elect. And that's what I did for a number of years. And then I got real close to time sort of stopping again. I in 2020, I decided the commissioner that represented where I live in Macon, Commissioner Burt Bivens, announced that he was retiring. And we wanted, I wanted someone who had the moral fiber, if they were in that room, to say no. And we asked a whole lot of people, and a lot of people raised their hand, and I didn't know if they could. But I knew I would hope that I would, and so I ran. And I won.
I know that's right.
And we won in August. It was a crazy year. It was COVID, and the election kept getting pushed and pushed, but it finally happened. And then shortly thereafter, if Tennessee died on Halloween, Tennessee died on a holiday. And on Christmas morning of the year 2020, we woke up to news that 2 poor souls froze to death in Macon, Georgia. And on the 26th, I got a call from a man that I did not know very well yet when we had run in the same cycle, and we had found ourselves in a runoff together. and we had both won our respective races, but I had not spent much time with Mayor Miller just yet, with Lester. And he called me and said, he sent me, I don't know if anybody ever interacts with him, if he's not Facebooking, he usually communicates through the comment section of the 13WMAZ or text message. And he was communicating with me through text message and sent me the story and said, we need to meet. And I had this holy shit moment. This is not how I wanted to start. I don't know what happens next. I don't know this man, but I don't want to deal with this issue. I didn't feel ready. And so he asked me to meet at his law office before New Year's Eve. I don't remember which day, but it was before New Year's Eve. And I walked in and could feel time begin to slow down, because who I saw in the room were social workers, people from the sheriff's department, Republicans and Democrats. And I thought this was it. This was a decision that we had to make. And I didn't know what it meant. But I knew that doing the right thing is often, when it comes to homelessness, is not the politically right thing. And right there, I watched this group of people that I am honored to serve with make the decision that was moral and decent. I did not have to oppose anything. He did the equal opposite of what the city of Atlanta decided to do. He looked at us and he said, I have an idea. I have a vacant school. And I think I have an answer to where this doesn't have to happen next year. And it was the sheer will of politics. This community unanimously voted. In full juxtaposition, the city of Atlanta unanimously voted to close that center. Unanimously worked against it. Good people, too, I would add. It made it very, very, very something that they're going to be asked about at the pearly gates. And again, politics trigger warning. There aren't many Republicans in the city of Atlanta, and there are here. It would have been a lot easier for the city of Atlanta to do the right thing and to sell it morally. But here, I got a chance on another holiday to be a part of something that was right. And your community, in full juxtaposition to the city of Atlanta, all your voices, wherever you live in this community, co-authored legislation that opened a homeless shelter because people died. That's not my story. That's your story. That's what this process of electoral politics can be. And time sped back up, because through y'all being intentional and electing moral and decent people, despite the letter beside their name or the color of their skin or some buzzword that they didn't or did say, you put decent people in a place that made a decision that could have derailed their political career. But it didn't, because the basis of their political career is you. I don't know if those people in the Atlanta City Council ever had that. I don't know. I'd like to give them the benefit of the doubt that they did not have people behind them, because they made the wrong decision. But that's when time stopped for me, was the day that Tennessee died. And I want to thank you. And I want you to thank the social workers that you know that work in those moments and are there for that suffering and that hurt and that pain that exists in every community. Because they're there and it affects them and it stays with them for decades. And it should. But it doesn't make it any less hard. they are truly fighting against a rushing river. And time will most certainly stop if it hasn't already in the work that they are doing at a moment in time. And always, always, always break out of the lane that you want to define yourself politically. Because no matter what club you're in or what association you share or what anything, it's not. Trust the person and elect the right person, because people's lives are at stake. And those moments where times stop can become fewer and further between. Thank you.